So here on Rainmakers, we have been talking every single week that we're on about those people who are having a global impact. But you know, Gail, something that's really, really important is education everywhere we go, not just in the United States, but in developing countries too.
So, Stan, you interviewed Mary Liz Kehler.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what your thoughts were about her idea or her concepts on education.
What I was just totally shocked. Here's this person who truly has global skills. I mean, those global skills came in from finance with the World Bank, and she is helping an organization work with kids to build sustainable schools in Paraguay. You know, and I thought to myself, sustainable, I mean, how can that be? Every school I know, it just takes more and more money. But no, these kids are learning to work together from an agricultural standpoint to be sustainable in a country that is very, very low income.
So, how long has she been doing this, and where does she see this going? Is it going to go beyond Paraguay?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. I'm not certain how long that they've been at it. I know that Fundacion Paraguaya, which is the organization, has been around for about 25 years. And they are looking at other parts of the world because they want to take their model and put it in other parts of the world. But it's not them that started it. It is other people learning about their success and then saying, hey, come and help us in the same way. And so how important is education? Is there anything more important?
Well, here's another rainmaker. I think that education is the basis on how to get yourselves out of poverty and get your families out of poverty. Because if you, a wise man once said, IQ and gumption are evenly distributed around the world, and it just takes a little education to spark that.
Yeah, so I strongly encourage you to watch the interview with Mary Liz Kehler, watch it twice, and we'll be back right after the interview.
Well, the Fundacion Paraguaya is a financially self-sustaining social enterprise based in Paraguay, which develops entrepreneurial solutions to poverty and unemployment in Paraguay, but to disseminate to other countries around the world.
That's amazing that any social enterprise could be, you know, in the black. So tell us how you guys are able to do it while so many others are not.
Well, one of our key programs is a microfinance program, which generates a small surplus. And unlike many other microfinance programs, though, we are not a bank. We're a social enterprise. So we take our surplus and we reinvest it in other programs, other complementary programs that are designed to promote entrepreneurship as a solution to poverty and unemployment. So, for example, with our surplus from the microfinance program, we've developed a new model of education for poor rural youth with a view to turning them into rural entrepreneurs.
Rural entrepreneurs, well, poor rural youth and rural entrepreneurs, what types of businesses are they undertaking? Are they undertaking businesses that you suggest, or do they do them themselves?
Well, the school is very unusual in the sense that it has a number of commercially successful small enterprises on its campus. And so students spend half of their high school years in the classroom and half performing practical activities in these enterprises. So the enterprises serve both as a platform for students to learn practical and entrepreneurial skills, and they also generate income. And with this income, the school covers all of its operating costs, and therefore it doesn't have to depend on government subsidies or long-term support from donors, or charge high school fees that would exclude the very students we're trying to serve. So in the process of this education, students learn that making a decent living in the countryside is more than just the traditional agricultural activities that one might think of. Yes, they involve growing crops and raising animals, but we try to show them that it's possible to find, to add value to that farm production, and also to find niche markets and new opportunities in existing markets so that they can make a much better living in the countryside than, say, their parents have. Also, the rural sector is more than just producing crops and animals. There are also rural services. There is rural tourism. There are roadside stores that use products produced on the farm. So there are a whole host of opportunities that young people can turn to once they graduate.
Is there a relationship between the Foundation's microfinance program and the schools themselves?
Yes, in two respects. First of all, we applied the lessons we learned in running a very well-regarded microfinance program to starting this agricultural school. But secondly, in order to graduate from this school, students have to develop their own business plan, and it has to be generally for an activity that they would carry out on their family farms. And it has to be of sufficient quality that it would qualify for a line of credit from our microfinance program. And this is an arm's length transaction because our microfinance program is otherwise separate from the school. And because we are a financially self-sufficient organization ourselves, we don't make microfinance loans unless we think that the borrower has a good possibility of repayment. So these are good quality business plans that the students come up with, and they get financing, or they can draw on financing when they graduate. Not all of them choose to draw on it, but the financing is available if they need it in order to put their business plans into effect.
Now, we talked about schools, so you have more than one school?
We have, the first school we developed is a co-ed school. We took over the administration of this school in 2003 and set out the objective of making it financially self-sufficient in 5 years, which we did by the end of 2007. And then on the basis of that experience, we've been working with the Nike Foundation to develop another school following the same model, but only for girls, to see whether a school of this kind can be a powerful tool in economically empowering low-income rural girls. And at the same time, this particular school is located in a UNESCO-recognized biosphere forest reserve. And its purpose is also to teach the community around this reserve how to make sustainable living while protecting this valuable natural resource. And so we hope with this new school we'll be serving a double purpose. One, economically empowering low-income rural girls, and two, empowering a whole community to protect this important forest.
Wow, it sounds like not only are you affecting change individually, but you're affecting cultural change, and sometimes cultural changes are not particularly well received. Have you found that?
Yes, we have, but although there's sometimes a little resistance at the beginning, I think the example of what's being achieved overcomes the community's doubts rather quickly.
Typically it's the men who reject the cultural change because it's women who are becoming empowered. Is that what you have found?
Maybe there is some skepticism, but as soon as it becomes clear that there's an economic benefit here, it's not just a benefit to the girl, it's a benefit to the whole family and her future family, the men are pretty supportive. I can give you an example of a wonderful young woman named Miranda, who was leading a tour through the forest of visitors. And she explained how reluctant her father had been to let her go away from home in order to start this program, because it is a boarding program. And in the end, he agreed to it because the girl was so persistent. And he's now one of the greatest supporters of the school. Another example of the cultural problems that you alluded to is that this particular reserve is in an area where there are 2 indigenous tribes. The people in these communities have been really left behind in the process of modernization. They live in extreme poverty and with very few services. And the idea was to invite girls from both of these indigenous communities to become part of the student body. And indeed girls from both communities enrolled. But when one tribe found out that the other tribe's daughters were going to go to this school, they withdrew their girls because these two tribes have been antagonistic for centuries. And however, the second year in which the school was in operation, the second tribe sent its girls because they realized what a wonderful opportunity this was.
So the rising tide floats all boats.
Yes, and I think the one lesson that becomes very apparent is that that people have much more in common than they do differences.
You know, you have described a financially self-sustaining nonprofit organization and that operates a financially self-sustaining school. Are people coming to you and saying, how do you do this?
Well, yes, indeed they are. We have partners in a number of different countries. First of all, we established a network. We established a sister organization called Teach a Man to Fish, which is based in London. And its mission has been to develop a community of organizations and individuals interested in this concept of the financially self-sufficient school. And it now has 2,000 members worldwide in 120 countries. Now, not all of those organizations and individuals are in a position to have a financially self-sufficient school, but we have about 30 partners around the world who are in some stage of adopting this model, and that we have about 5 who are actually doing it. One of our alumni is Jorge Guerrero. He is the 10th child of 19 brothers and sisters of a subsistence farming family in Paraguay. They live about 200 miles from the capital city, the first hour of which is dirt roads to get to the main highway. You can imagine that a child growing up in these kinds of circumstances doesn't have many opportunities. But Jorge was fortunate enough to finish the 9th grade, and he came to our school and graduated first in his class. And however, his dream was to go to university and get a degree in agronomy. But he couldn't live at home because it was too far away. And he didn't have family resources to help him pay for his room and board or his books or his transportation. But Jorge was able to work out a deal with an old age home that had a little plot of land that it wasn't using. And he made the proposition to them that he would develop an organic garden on their empty plot of land and supply the old age home with fresh vegetables, which they'd never had. And he would sell the surplus from this garden to cover his incidental expenses at the university, and they would give him room and board. And so on the basis of this agreement, Jorge is now in his 5th year of the agronomy track at the National University and is about to graduate. And his plan is to expand this organic vegetable business into a much larger enterprise and to operate it in the district around in the district where his community is located. So that's an example of the really transformational education that takes place when you give these kids these entrepreneurial opportunities during high school.
You work in the Washington, D.C. office, run the Washington,
Yes.
D.C. office, but you used to live there.
Yes, I did.
So a big part of the Clinton Global Initiative is that there truly is hope out there. Have you seen firsthand that there is indeed hope?
Oh, absolutely. I see hope when I visit our microfinance clients. I see hope when I talk to the students at our school, both the co-ed school where Jorge graduated and the new girls' school that I spoke of in the forest. These kids are committed and they have incredible drive. And if anything gives me optimism, it's seeing what these kids want to achieve in their lives, and I'm sure they'll do it.
So again, I was very, very impressed with Fundacion Paraguaya. So impressed with the fact that here are schools that are actually making an impact, not only for the individuals, as you were talking about, Gail, and their families and their communities, but making an impact on markets. Isn't that something?
You know, it's amazing. We get an opportunity to meet so many wonderful people being part of the Rainmakers crew. Interestingly, when we were at the Clinton Global Initiative, I was riding in an elevator and met our next guest, and that is Abby Falik. And she started to tell me in her 30-second elevator pitch about her organization and what she's wanting to do. I was so excited about what she had, I immediately thought we've got to interview her, because this is a great model that gives students a chance between high school and college to get some volunteer time in another country.
And you know, that's something very interesting that you were talking about, because you said it was a great model, and almost every single person that we talked to, and we did 20-something interviews over the course of a couple of days, and we were really tired after the Clinton Global Initiative was over, but every single person with all of these NGOs, they're trying to build not just something for themselves and not just something for their own organization, but they're trying to build models.
And you know, that's part of the commitment they make at the Clinton Global Initiative, is to commit to something, follow it through, and then be able to tell people about it so others can either do it, copy it, or improve on it.
Yeah, and Rainmakers TV isn't about the Clinton Global Initiative. I was just knocked out by the quality of human being that was there and all of the successes that they're having based on sustainability.
There is absolutely a plethora of wonderful organizations out there. Again, those great corporations that help making great things happen.
Abby Falik's next up.
I lead an initiative called Global Citizen Year, and we empower high school graduates with a global perspective on themselves, our nation, and the world through a supported year before starting college, where they live and work as apprentices in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And the vision is that one day it's just the norm that high school grads take a year to learn about themselves and the world before continuing with their higher education.
So how did you come up with this idea?
I've been dreaming it up since I was 18. I finished high school, wanted to take a break before college because I didn't know anything but the classroom at that point. I called the Peace Corps on the phone and was told, little girl, we'll see you in 4 years, because you actually need a college degree to join the Peace Corps. So the irony that at age 18 you can join the military, but there is no national opportunity for global civilian service outside the military really stayed with me. And so honestly, ever since, I've been designing the blueprint for what is now Global Citizen Year.
So how many students do you have in your program now?
We launched 1 year ago with 11 students who came from very diverse backgrounds across the U.S. They spent the year in Africa and Latin America, came back last spring, and are now beginning their freshman year at colleges across the country. We've tripled the size of our second year's cohort, so we have 33 students who will be spending the year in either Senegal, Brazil, or Ecuador. And our CGI commitment is to reach 1,000 American high school grads by the year 2015.
So long-term effects, what do these students hope to gain personally? Now, obviously, you mentioned getting to know themselves. Do you think there's going to be more understanding because they've had some global experience?
Absolutely. So young people go out into the world and they live for an extended period in often small communities in the countries where they are. They're living with a host family. They learn to speak a new language, and they're learning a critical language, one that is important as an American in the world to today be able to interact beyond just English. So 9% of Americans speak another language as compared to 54% of our European peers. So our schools are doing an abysmal job of preparing Americans for global engagement, and the skills that you can develop through global immersion and real-life work experience serve you well, certainly for college, to approach your higher education with intention, a sense of purpose, broader perspective, but also for your career. There's no doubt that corporations are looking for young people who have 21st century skills that, frankly, very few college grads have even developed in the classroom.
Okay, so I think this is just marvelous. I don't quite understand this idea of apprenticeship. So they go there with a host family, so they have obviously the security of being in a close family because they're still young.
Exactly.
But the apprentice?
So the apprentice model is meant to be different from a traditional volunteer model or a traditional model of something like the Peace Corps, where you're sending a development worker out to really create sustainable local change, at least in theory, in the communities. We need to be sensitive to the fact that these are young people who, for the most part, haven't traveled, don't yet speak the local language, and really are meant to arrive and spend most of their time stepping back to observe, to listen, to really embed themselves in the family where they're living and the organization where they're working. And that's the role as an apprentice, is that they have a professional mentor, and they may be teaching in a school or shadowing a health professional in a health clinic. They might be working in the fields and supporting agricultural projects. They might be installing and training people to use appropriate technology, because that's certainly something that all young people coming out of school in this country can do, whether they realize it or not. It's a strength. They're all techies. So how do we put those skills to use in the service of supporting local efforts, but finding the right balance so that the frame is not them there to change the world in the short term, but actually them there to observe, learn, and find a way to contribute in a way that's valuable.
Well, okay, so how do you prepare these kids who are really maybe for the first time ever going to be away from home for any period of time? How do you prepare them to be away from their families, to accept and understand new cultural norms, and to still engage and learn while they're there?
Great question. So we begin working with the students as soon as they're admitted to the program, and they apply at the same time they would be applying to college. The college grants them a deferral, and there's an increasing trend toward college admissions offices encouraging kids to take time off before they start. Princeton University's taken the lead, where they have up to 10% of their incoming class where they're encouraging them to spend a year doing service work in the developing world before they enter as freshmen at Princeton. So our vision is to provide that service and that benefit to colleges across the country. So once the students have been admitted to the program, they spend the summer fundraising and mobilizing local supporters. And from our mind, that's actually an opportunity for them to begin to prepare for the experience. So they're learning to tell their story, they're learning to identify resources in their own communities, and it also then becomes an important way for them to own the experience. So whether their parents have supported the tuition or they've received a scholarship from one of our generous investors, foundations, and individuals who make the opportunity accessible financially, the students feel bought in. They've worked to earn what will then be a 9-month intensive leadership training. So the entire program is set up to support their own personal development and growth. Before they even travel, they all come together in California for a training boot camp, which is focused on authentic leadership. We work with Outward Bound and other professionals who train all kinds of leaders to understand their own strengths and limitations. We introduce them to social innovators so that they're meeting with social entrepreneurs, John Wood at Room to Read, the founders of Kiva.org, to really give them a sense for the type of career that people can pursue. And then we introduce them to the foundations of international development. So we have Stanford professors and practitioners from groups like CARE, the Clinton Foundation, the Gates Foundation, who come in and help our students develop a framework for understanding the context that they'll be living in and immersed in when they travel.
So these kids, some of them I understand from you mentioning scholarships, are some not necessarily from very advantaged families. So can you tell me a story about somebody who really wouldn't have been able to experience this and what they've gone through?
So from a mission perspective, we're fundamentally committed to providing access to kids who would have never had the opportunity to travel, whose parents haven't traveled. So I met Matt Davis a year ago. He grew up in real poverty in Indianapolis. He'd never been on an airplane, and I had the terrific fortune of being introduced to him by a mentor that he had in his hometown. And he knocked my socks off in the interview, and here was a young man who was almost failing out of high school because it was just so irrelevant to his life. And he described to me the challenge of living in a family where there wasn't always rent or electricity or even consistent food on the table, and how was it possible for him to then focus on his math homework when those were the challenges that he faced daily. And he explained how he had always dreamed of spending time in Africa as an African-American male, and to have the insight into where his people came from initially and what his real identity is as being part African, part American, and then really coming to a new conclusion of what that identity is, which is kind of not a 1+1, but actually something entirely different. So Matt spent the year living and working on a farm in a rural community outside of Dakar, Senegal. He worked a couple days a week with a family farm where he was watering tomatoes and peppers. A couple days a week he was on a big agricultural commercial farm where he was understanding the production cycle and some of the challenges that are faced by bigger farmers in that community. And then he made his way into Dakar at some point and connected with a USAID official who became his mentor, and he started connecting the dots. Through his experience with Global Citizen Year, clearly have transformed everything about what he now aspires to do.
Well, it sounds to me that you actually have an amazing program, and if you could tell me in 10 years where you expect to be, where do you think that is?
10 years, I hope that the most common question that high school graduates are asked is, where will you do your Global Citizen Year? So when others are scrambling for college admittances and college applications, can it be the common expectation that young Americans, as part of their duty to our country and as part of their training in the world, experience life in places far beyond our borders? 10 years from now, the vision would be 10,000 young Americans participating in Global Citizen Year every year.
So education's not the great equalizer, as some people used to say. Instead, education is about giving individuals the opportunity to excel, right?
You know, I agree with that, Stan, and it also comes in many forms. It's the schools, it's the individuals, it's learning from another family, it's internships. Many, many forms happen because of the educational opportunities.
And there were so many other groups at the Clinton Global Initiative that were tied in with education in some way, and we were very fortunate to be able to talk with these two here. But Abby Falik, though, she's got a lot of energy, right?
She does, and she is going to make that program succeed just because of her ability to garner so many other collaborative organizations and people to the cause.
And if you want to learn more about those organizations, go to our website, www.rainmakers.tv. And when you get there, search around a little bit, because there's lots of organizations. Maybe you're going to want to get involved in one. Just make some change in the world. We'll see you next week on Rainmakers.